In the 1950s, every kitchen had secrets. The first thing every housewife knew was how to make butter last twice as long by whipping it with an equal amount of milk. It was a time of ingenuity and making the most of what was available. Kitchens were the heart of the home, and the aromas that wafted from them were the stuff of memories. It was a time when a meal was more than just food. It was a gathering, a celebration, a comfort. And at the center of it all were the dishes that defined a generation. The 1950s was a decade of transition. The war was over, and a new era of prosperity was dawning. Families were growing, and the suburbs were booming. And in the heart of every new suburban home was a brand new kitchen, a gleaming testament to the American dream. These kitchens were a far cry from the cramped, utilitarian spaces of the past. They were bright, airy, and filled with the latest modern conveniences. There were refrigerators with freezer compartments, electric ranges with multiple burners, and stand mixers that could whip up a batch of cookies in no time. For the 1950s housewife, this new kitchen was her kingdom, and she ruled it with a gentle but firm hand. She was the keeper of the family's traditions, the guardian of their health and happiness, and the food she served was an expression of her love. One of the most iconic of these was the humble, yet ever-present tuna noodle casserole, a creamy, hearty dish. It was a staple on dinner tables across the country. Made with simple, affordable ingredients like canned tuna, egg noodles, and a can of cream of mushroom soup, it was the perfect weeknight meal. Often topped with a crunchy layer of crushed potato chips, it was a dish that was both satisfying and comforting, a true taste of the 1950s. Beyond the casserole, the 1950s kitchen was a place of hearty, satisfying meals. Meatloaf, for instance, was a king among weeknight dinners. It wasn't the gourmet creation of today, with its exotic spices and artisanal ketchup. No, the 1950s meatloaf was a testament to simplicity and flavor. A mix of ground beef and perhaps a little pork for richness, bound together with breadcrumbs and eggs, and seasoned with a touch of onion and a hint of salt and pepper. It was often glazed with a simple tomato sauce or ketchup and baked until the top was browned and slightly crisp. Served alongside a generous helping of creamy mashed potatoes and a ladleful of rich brown gravy, it was a meal that spoke of home and comfort. It was the kind of meal that a family would gather around the dinner table for, sharing stories of their day as they savored each bite. Then there was the pot roast, a Sunday dinner tradition in many homes. A large cut of beef, slow cooked for hours with carrots, potatoes, and onions, until it was so tender it would fall apart with the touch of a fork. The aroma of a pot roast simmering on the stove was a sign that Sunday had arrived. It was a meal that brought families together, a time to relax and enjoy each other's company after a long week. The vegetables cooked in the rich beef broth were soft and flavorful, and the gravy, made from the pan drippings, was the perfect finishing touch. It was a meal that was both elegant and comforting, a true celebration of family and food. And who could forget chicken and dumplings, a dish that was pure comfort in a bowl. Tender pieces of chicken, cooked in a rich, savory broth with fluffy, cloud-like dumplings floating on top. It was the kind of meal that would warm you from the inside out on a cold winter's day. The dumplings, made from a simple biscuit-like dough, were dropped by the spoonful into the simmering broth, where they would cook to perfection. Each bite was a delightful combination of tender chicken, savory broth, and light, fluffy dumplings. It was a dish that was both simple and sublime, a true taste of home. Of course, no 1950s meal was complete without a side dish, and one of the most popular was the green bean casserole, a simple yet delicious concoction of green beans, cream of mushroom soup, and a topping of crispy fried onions. It was a staple at holiday gatherings and potlucks. It was a dish that could be assembled in minutes and then baked until bubbly and golden brown. The creamy sauce, the tender green beans, and the crunchy onion topping created a symphony of textures and flavors that was simply irresistible. It was a dish that was both a side and a star, a true classic of the 1950s. And then there were the salads, but not the leafy green salads of today. In the 1950s, salads were often molded, and Jell-O was the star ingredient. From a simple fruit cocktail suspended in a shimmering mold of gelatin to more elaborate creations with layers of different flavors and colors, Jell-O salads were a staple at any gathering. They were a feast for the eyes as well as the palate, with their bright colors and intricate shapes. And they were a testament to the creativity of the 1950s housewife, who could transform a simple box of gelatin into a work of art. For dessert, there was always something sweet and satisfying. Pineapple upside-down cake, with its caramelized pineapple rings and maraschino cherries, was a showstopper. Baked in a cast-iron skillet, the cake was flipped over after baking, to reveal its beautiful, glistening topping. It was a cake that was both beautiful and delicious, a perfect ending to any meal. And then there was the classic chocolate cream pie, with its rich, velvety chocolate filling and a cloud of whipped cream on top. It was a pie that was both decadent and comforting, a true indulgence. So how did they do it back then? How did the housewives of the 1950s create these comforting and memorable meals? It was a combination of ingenuity, resourcefulness, and a deep understanding of the kitchen. They were masters of their domain, and they had a few tricks up their sleeves. For one, they were not afraid of canned goods. In fact, canned goods were a modern convenience that they embraced with open arms. Canned soups, in particular, were a secret weapon in the 1950s kitchen. A can of cream of mushroom soup could be transformed into a creamy sauce for a casserole, a gravy for a meatloaf, or a base for a soup. It was a versatile ingredient that saved time and added a rich, savory flavor to any dish. Canned tuna, canned peas, and canned pineapple were also staples in the 1950s pantry. They were affordable, convenient, and available year-round, which made them a practical choice for the budget-conscious housewife. But it wasn't all about convenience. The 1950s housewife also had a deep respect for fresh, seasonal ingredients. They knew how to make the most of what was available, whether it was fresh vegetables from the garden or a cut of meat from the local butcher. They knew how to stretch a dollar and make a little go a long way. They were experts at transforming simple, humble ingredients into delicious and satisfying meals, and they were not afraid of a little hard work. They kneaded their own bread, rolled out their own pie crusts, and churned their own butter. They took pride in their work, and it showed in the food they served. They understood that the best meals were made with love, and they poured their hearts into every dish. They also had a few clever tricks that they passed down from generation to generation. They knew that adding a pinch of sugar to a tomato sauce would balance out the acidity. They knew that a splash of vinegar would make a meringue more stable, and they knew that a cold, well-floured pastry cloth was the secret to a flaky pie crust. These were the little things that made a big difference, the secrets that were passed down from mother to daughter. The kitchen itself was a different world. There were no microwaves or food processors. Instead, there were hand mixers, meat grinders, and a trusty set of mixing bowls. The refrigerator was a new and exciting appliance, and it was often the centerpiece of the kitchen. It was a symbol of modern convenience, a place to store leftovers and keep food fresh. The oven, too, was a workhorse. It was used for everything from baking cakes and pies to roasting meats and vegetables. And the stovetop was where the magic happened, where sauces were simmered, soups were brewed, and meals were brought to life. The 1950s housewife was also a master of presentation. They knew that a meal should be a feast for the eyes as well as the palate. They took the time to garnish their dishes with a sprig of parsley or a slice of lemon. They arranged their food on platters with care and precision, and they set the table with their best china and silverware for special occasions. They understood that a meal was an experience, and they wanted to make it a memorable one. And let's not forget the social aspect of food in the 1950s. The dinner table was a place for families to connect and share their day. It was a time to put aside the worries of the world and enjoy each other's company. And the potluck was a beloved tradition, a chance for friends and neighbors to come together and share their favorite dishes. It was a time of community and connection, and food was at the heart of it all. What can we learn from the kitchens of the 1950s? Perhaps the most important lesson is the value of a home-cooked meal. In a world that is constantly moving, there is something to be said for taking the time to slow down and create something with our own hands. There is a sense of satisfaction that comes from preparing a meal for the people we love, a sense of connection that is forged over a shared meal. We can also learn a lesson in resourcefulness. The 1950s housewife was a master of making the most of what she had, of turning simple ingredients into something special. In a time when we are all trying to be more mindful of our consumption, this is a lesson that is more relevant than ever. And finally, we can learn to appreciate the simple joy of comfort food. In a world of fleeting trends and complicated recipes, there is something to be said for a dish that is simple, satisfying, and speaks of home. Another weeknight warrior was the Salisbury steak. Not quite a steak, not quite a hamburger. It occupied a delicious space in between. Ground beef was lovingly shaped into oval patties, pan-fried to a perfect brown, and then simmered in a rich onion gravy. It was a dish that was both economical and elegant, a way to elevate humble ground beef into something special. Served with a side of buttered egg noodles or fluffy white rice, it was a meal that was both hearty and comforting, a testament to the ingenuity of the 1950s home cook. And for a touch of the exotic, there was beef stroganoff, A dish with Russian roots, it became an American classic in the 1950s. Tender strips of beef were sautéed with mushrooms and onions, and then bathed in a creamy sauce made with sour cream. The result was a dish that was both rich and tangy, a delightful departure from the everyday. Served over a bed of egg noodles, it was a meal that was perfect for a special occasion, a taste of faraway lands in the heart of the American home. And what about those potlucks and picnics? No gathering was complete without a bowl of ambrosia salad, a sweet and creamy concoction of canned fruit cocktail, miniature marshmallows, and shredded coconut, all bound together with a dollop of whipped cream or sour cream. It was a dish that was both a salad and a dessert, a sweet and refreshing treat that was always a crowd pleaser. It was a taste of the tropics, a ray of sunshine in a bowl, and a reminder of the simple joys of a shared meal. And let's not forget the simple yet satisfying grilled cheese sandwich. A classic for a reason, the grilled cheese was a lunchtime staple in the 1950s. 2 slices of white bread, a slice of American cheese, and a generous pat of butter were all that was needed to create this masterpiece. Cooked in a hot skillet until the bread was golden brown and the cheese was melted and gooey, it was a sandwich that was both simple and sublime. Often served with a bowl of tomato soup, it was a meal that was both comforting and nostalgic, a taste of childhood for many. In the realm of desserts, the 1950s were a time of sweet indulgence. Beyond the pineapple upside-down cake and the chocolate cream pie, there was the classic apple pie. A symbol of American pride, the apple pie was a staple at holiday gatherings and family picnics. A flaky, buttery crust filled with sweet, juicy apples and a hint of cinnamon. It was a pie that was both rustic and elegant. Served with a scoop of vanilla ice cream, it was a dessert that was both comforting and classic, a true taste of Americana. Another classic comfort food of the 1950s was the humble deviled egg. A staple at picnics, potlucks, and holiday gatherings, deviled eggs were a simple yet elegant appetizer. The yolks of hard-boiled eggs were mashed with mayonnaise, mustard, and a touch of vinegar, then piped back into the egg whites. A sprinkle of paprika was the finishing touch, adding a pop of color to this classic dish. It was a bite-sized treat that was both savory and satisfying, a perfect start to any meal. The 1950s kitchen was a place of warmth, comfort, and delicious aromas. It was a place where simple ingredients were transformed into memorable meals, and where families gathered to share their lives. The comfort foods of the 1950s were more than just food. They were a reflection of a time when life was a little simpler, a little slower, and a little more connected. And though times have changed, the appeal of these classic dishes remains. They are a taste of the past, a reminder of a time when a home-cooked meal was the ultimate expression of love.